Morning, everybody. Very nice to see everybody on this Forest Reserve Day. What is Forest Reserve? It's a raw black. Now, we'll talk about black teas and what's meant by that in a couple minutes. By the end of this session, you'll have a really good idea of what black teas and dark teas, according to the Chinese, really are. You'll have a really good sense of the tea itself, Forest Reserve. It comes from the Ailao Mountains. You'll have a sense about why tea from the Ailao Mountains is so special. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Shop news. We have some as usual, and today we'll have less shop news than last week. Last week, I got carried away, lack of self-control, the usual. The main thing that we've worked on this week is getting the shop to look a little bit better. So we focused a lot of attention on moving around boxes, actually consolidating material, also rearranging the material within the shop. So we're feeling really, really good about that. And part of that, I think, is an upbeat look at our business overall, an upbeat look at the tea business overall from our perspective. Because remembering, we do the tea business differently than most people. First off, we try and give you really good, accurate information. So this morning, actually last night, I was looking at the world's most famous sources of great, accurate information, seeing what the information I was finding was versus what I know to be true. So, of course, I checked the internet and ran across some information that talked about black tea, and here we mean fermented tea, and how most wholesalers will tell you stories to sell the tea, and that's all fairly accurate. What was not accurate was this sense that once, as a purveyor, you go to the tea fields, you know everything. So I ask you this. Aside from the tea master, now let's put the tea master aside, really, because she's in a whole different class. And if you don't say that she knows everything, then the mistake is with you. But the understudy, for example, do I know everything? And the answer is clearly not. Every year that we go back, I learn more and more, even though I've been going for over 20 years to tea fields. So there's always a lot to learn. And that's really, really important in this business because there's lots of items changing in this business. One area, for example, that you hear people talk about is a drought that's been existing in Yunnan since 2008, I should say. It's only been in some parts of Yunnan. It's not been in Yunnan total. Now, of course, this means that for the tea business overall, it is important to keep an eye on this because as weather changes, communities of plants are going to change as well. So this is a perfect point to morph to raw black, ancient tree, and what's happening in the Ailao Mountains. So generally speaking, within the national preserve, the wildlife preserve there, the climate change hasn't been as dramatic as in some other parts of Yunnan. And what you have within that preserve is about 4,000 acres. And that's in total. That's not linked together, but 4,000 acres of ancient tree groves. Now, let's put that in perspective. Let's think of what other 4,000 acre piece of land we might know of? Well, let me think a minute. How about the campus of UC Davis? UC Davis, which is just south of Sacramento, is on a 4,000-acre plot of land. So it's not a tiny piece of land, but it's also not an enormous piece of land in the big picture of things. In those 4,000 acres, you have individual trees that are isolated. So let's talk about that for a minute. In Fengcheng, you have the oldest tea tree that I'm aware of, about 3,500 years old. That's very isolated. It's not in the midst of a forest of tea trees. In the Ailao Mountains, you tend to have villages with segments of tea trees together. And they're all in the forest. And they're in the forest growing with other trees. In a way, you're looking at fossils, in a way. And it's kind of neat when you think about it in that regard. And so you saw some pictures that I sent, and you saw that the agricultural scientists have gone in to this area. This comes from the World Heritage Ailao Mountain Reserve site, and actually identified trees all along the path. It's very, very neat as you walk through this reserve and you see these tea trees, the different species of tea trees. And by the way, they're not just labeling the tea trees, they're labeling all the plants within that reserve, within this trail. And so it gives you some sense. And again, you're looking at plants that are 2,000 to 3,000 years old. And so really it's a fossil. You're looking backwards in time. Tea came from Yunnan, as far as anybody can tell. Again, we've talked about the fact that there's another thought about small leaf varietal coming from Sichuan, but it doesn't have as much proof as what you see when you walk through the Ailao Mountains or walk through any of these ancient tea tree groves. Doesn't mean it isn't true. I'm not convinced is all it means. So let's get down to Forest Reserve now right away. And let's get down to how it's processed. First off, it's indigenous peoples processing this. Indigenous peoples have history in processing tea, and their histories are different, and they're economically different, driven in a different way than, say, in Central China. Central China, what you have is Han people who have been processing tea that was either going to be sent to the emperor, oh, this better be really good, or sold to people. So there was different purposes, and there were different incentives naturally built in Central China versus in the forest. In the forest, what is it you're trying to do as an indigenous person? Well, you're trying to live at peace sustainably with your environment. You're not there clear-cutting trees. You're not there chasing animals from the environment. Instead, you're trying to fit into the environment. So the incentives of how you process things are different. And when you are picking plants, any plant, whether it be tea or any other plant, you're thinking about sustainability. You're thinking about, okay, I'm going to do this year, and the future generation will be doing this in years to come. Different thought process. So before we get to a really deep understanding of raw black and what we're going to do with the raw black, let's talk about this area. This area, again, being the Ailao Mountains, Yunnan County. What is it? How many people are involved in the tea business in this county? There's 70,000, approximately 70,000 people. Many of them farmers, many of them producers. Are any of the production facilities in the forest? Zero production facility in the forest. If you're out of the reserve and you are next to the reserve, living as an indigenous person, you have your own facilities in that village. But it's not industrial. It's to produce the tea that your village picks. So you don't have any industrial sites there. The industrial sites are all in the townships. And so people in the townships go into various places and within the preserve and next to the preserve and collect tea. But some of that tea is actually processed in those villages. So what you're having today, Forest Reserve, was processed in the Ailao Mountains. It did not go to a professional processor. Now, that's a funny thing to say, isn't it? A professional processor. A processor that's probably had their business for 20 or 30 years versus a village which has been there for thousands of years. So just so you know how I'm using the terms, I love getting the tea from the villages because it's so unique. What do they do in the townships that's different from the villages? These years, because of government and science encouragement, you are moving towards standardization. I'm not arguing with standardization because standardization for the masses is really good. You produce more, and the masses have access to more. But that's not what we're about at this tea shop. I don't think that's what any of you are about. You are about, we're all about the handcrafted stuff, the stuff that's most unusual, and the stuff that has history. This is how this village has been picking and producing tea for ages. And there's a handcraftedness to it, and there's an aesthetic to it. So let's talk about the terms. Let's get these terms out of the way. Black tea. What do we mean by black tea? Certainly not what the British are drinking in total. We're looking at what they call fermented tea. Yes.
Is village produced tea, with regard to the same teas, more different year to year than more industrialized processors tea?
Great question. So the questioner asked, when you look and talk about standardization, that implies that year in and year out, you're going to get something roughly the same. This is accurate. When you look at village tea, are you going to have wide variations between year to year? And the answer is yes, because now let's back up a minute, because I used the word wide there. And this may make some of you think that, oh, wow, we'll be out here at 1,000, whereas last year we were at 1. No, wide variation, what I really mean is variation driven by terroir. They don't try and compensate for weather changes. In the standardized model, they're trying to compensate for weather changes. They don't do that at the village level. They take what they have and they make the best of it year by year by year. And that creates a certain uniqueness in what they're doing. Yes.
The question is, how are indigenous people, or what are indigenous people called who process this tea? So if we call, the way I'm reading this, so-called professional processors, the more industrialized, the end of it, would you call this craft processors or?
I think I understand the question. So I think what the questioner is asking, are the village processors called craft processors versus those
Versus
who are doing
professionals
the,
or
yes.
industrialized?
Yeah, I'm sorry that I've gotten these terms all mixed up for you. Yes, that's exactly an accurate description. So what they're doing in the townships, this standardization, there's a certain professionalism that goes into that. So what is that professional? Let's talk about that and break that down a little bit, because this is a great question, which reminds me I haven't talked enough about this. So they have machinery. Oh, it's good machinery. It has dials on it. And on those dials, there's numbers. Okay, so if we see this number, all right, we're done in this process. We can go to the next process. In other words, think of Coca-Cola. Oh, horrors, don't think of Coca-Cola. Let's think of something else for a minute. Let's think of Bob's Red Mill doing cornmeal, coarse ground cornmeal. When they do that cornmeal, they have machines to measure just how much they've chopped it up. And those machines give accurate numbers. When you're doing anything standardized, there is a number that you're aiming for every year, because you know that number will approximate in a very close way what the year previous was. You're trying to make it so that consumers recognize your product year by year by year, and that there is, if it were possible, what they would tell you is no variation. Now, you and I both know no variation is theoretical, isn't it? Very little variation, hard to tell and distinguish variation. But absolutely zero variation are hard, very hard to achieve. Not impossible, but very, very hard to achieve. Versus in the villages are like grandma. So let's think about this a minute. Grandma, your favorite cherry pie, grandma makes. And I ask you, when you watch grandma do it, does she have all these fancy measuring cups? Is she using all the latest gadgets? The answer is no. She knows, she doesn't even have a recipe in front of her. It's in here. And she's going through, and she knows when she looks at those cherries, oh, these are a little soft. I've got to do this a little differently. Hey, how come they pick these and they're hard? Well, now I've got to do something else. This is the variation that occurs at the village level. And so that's really the difference I'm trying to highlight between, in quotes, standardized professionalism versus the aesthetic, handcrafted professionalism. Both are professional. They both should be called professional, but there's a different starting point. And from a handcrafted point of view, because you and I understand year by year, there could be a wide variation. We aren't turned off right away. Oh, 2022 wasn't the same as 2021. That's okay. Bring me 2022 so I can taste it. Does it have enough of the taste characteristics, enough of the quality assessment characteristics to be on the board? That's all I care about. And at the end of the day, that's really all you care about. You want goodness. And you have a range which goodness falls in. All right. So we're talking about these villages. We're now talking about definitions, these terminology things. Black tea. What we mean here is fermented. What they mean in Britain is oxidized. Okay? Difference. Raw black. What is that? I call that unfinished tea. There's a term for that in Chinese, Mao Cha. Did I say unfinished? I did. I do call it unfinished. I usually really call it 70% finished. And really, it's a process where they take the tea to a certain point and then they let it age. But all after they're in that aging process, you can taste it, you can drink it, and you can appreciate it. And you can see that aging process go along at the same time. That's what the raw black is. It's 70% finished in relationship to 100% of a fully composted, ripened black, cooked black. So that's the distinction that's being made here. Anytime you hear the term matcha, that means that somehow it isn't at the most complete process that it could be at. That's all it refers to. And there are many reasons to stop before you get to that most complete, including a different taste profile. So in China, because of the English confusion between black and fully fermented and raw, they in Yunnan use the word dark tea sometimes. So you see this sometimes on the internet. Oh yeah, we sell dark tea. You're thinking to yourself, dark tea, gosh, why don't they have that category at Sophie's? I've never seen dark tea at Sophie's. They don't have it at Sophie's because we translate heicha correctly. Heicha has always been black. The dark terminology has arisen so that people in the West don't get confused between oxidized and fermented. So what we call red tea, heavily oxidized versus the fermented tea. That's all it is. There's no other difference. All right, so we've gotten that out of the way. So let's talk. In fact, let's stop talking because I'm hearing the tea master rattle around and I can tell that she's getting thirsty. Instead of talking, let's demonstrate how forest reserve should be made. And it is with great pleasure that I bring up the luminescent tea master.
你好，早上好。我们做生普，生普 is rock like 生普。Okay, so today 呢 I'm changing little bit. This is my another dark reason. So yeah, we are with cups, not 4. Okay.
So you see the tableau that she set up. 3 cups so that she can cool down the tea faster. This is a strainer, kind of cute strainer into a glass container.
Cool down the water and dissipate steam, right?
Yes, cool down the water and dissipate steam. Thank you. And a tea tray. This is some old Buddha or some old Taoist. Actually, that was very disrespectful. This is a fancy old Taoist.
It's 功夫茶 I do 功夫茶 large.
So Kung Fu Cha here doesn't mean small cup. What it means is master grade of doing tea. That's all it really refers to. And anytime you hear the term Kung Fu Cha, you have to put it in context with how the person is talking or what they're really referring to. So here it means master grade. All right, so the tea master is drying out 175-degree water because that's how our towers are programmed. We're gonna cool the temperature as well as dissipate the heat. The brewing temperature for this is 170 degrees. The number of grams is 6 grams, and it's a 3-minute steeping time. Oh, and for those of you who are interested This is 2021. Is this 2021 or 2019? I think it's 2021. Okay, 2022. Yes, last year's pick. So this is very different from Cascade. That's right. I'm getting this confused with Cascade, which is 2019.
Participant asks, is pu'er tea either raw or fully fermented?
Yes. So the question is pu'er tea either raw or fully fermented? And yes, so they have a term in Chinese, shoupu. Shoupu means fully fermented, fully cooked, and these days, what that means is composted. Then they have the term shengpu, which means ripened or uncooked, and so I call that the 70% finished. All right, you see the tea master is making sure that all the cups are completely clean. And again, this is proper to refer to as a Gunfu methodology, which means a master tea methodology. Dissipating the steam, reducing the heat. Remember, if you're going to air cooler. Set the timer for 3 minutes. And you notice there's a rhythm. The rhythm isn't in a hurry. It's you don't want to be too fast. You certainly don't want to be insanely slow, but you just want that nice, even rhythm, including that great rhythm of catching it before you drop it. Oh, wait a minute. That wasn't supposed to be said. Sorry, accident. Tea leaves go in the heated cup. Tea master shakes the cup. Smells it, make sure we have the right tea in there. Tea master pours the tea into a vessel, into a kettle, where we can control where the tea pours in the cup.
Where the hot water pours.
Yes, where the hot water pours. Thank you. All right, so we set the timer for 3 minutes. Take a look at this beauty. You have tea at the top. You have tea floating up from the bottom. This is truly a beautiful cup of tea, forest reserve. And I like the fact that the tea leaves, some of them are actually standing up, and you can see that a few of them are coming off the bottom to stand up. Okay, so we're talking about the differences between raw and fully fermented. Let's do the process of raw black. So you got to pick the tea. Pick the tea. Usually it's a bud and 2 leaves. Sometimes it's a bud and 3 leaves. In this case, it's a bud and 2 leaves. So this is a little bit more tender. Because the further down you pick, the more you get leaves that are more mature and not as tender. You pick, you wither. And when you wither, usually in Yunnan, especially in this area, you wither outdoors, unless it's raining, in which case you can use a machine to air wither, or you can put them in a room and wither. And many of these villages are equipped with both methodologies. After withering, you fry. You fry at a lower temperature. Now, we're going to spend some time with this frying because previously, some of you have noted, hey, you know, this tastes a little bit like green tea. So what's the difference between tasting like green tea versus tasting like raw black? It's in this step, the step of frying. What's the difference in frying green tea versus raw black? Well, with green tea, you better get it really, really hot. Unless you're in Japan. Well, even if you're in Japan, you better get it really, really hot, but you're steaming it hot. In China, you're frying it hot. So what does hot mean? It means between 300 and 400 degrees. I mean, truly hot. And you fry it long enough to denature the enzymes within the tea leaf. What are you doing with the raw black? You're frying, all right. Pot is too hot for you to leave your hand there. But the pot is more like 200 degrees. And you're frying it for a shorter amount of time. Why are you doing that? So two things occur, one of which you're consciously aware of, and that is you're trying to not destroy all the microorganisms, the fungi, all the microorganisms on the tea leaves. By the way, timer went off. Tea master is gonna go ahead and separate the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Not in a hurry. But with rhythm. Making sure that all the water is out so that you can have a nice second and third steeping of this. All right, so let's look at this color. This is somewhat yellowish. In fact, oh my gosh, it's got some deep yellow in it. Wow, maybe this is strong. Well, we'll see in a minute. Let's look at these leaves. Oh, my goodness. Wow, very distinct. Leaves are pretty big. Let's do the quality assessment. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to ascertain where the astringency is, what the degree of astringency is, and should the astringency be in the same place for all of you? No, we're all genomically different. So in your mouth, whether it's the roof, the tongue, farther back in the mouth, it's going to be different. That's not a problem. And then there's going to be an aftertaste. This is the first sip. So you take a larger sip and you're going to make you're going to ascertain all of them. So now when you brew, in addition to thinking about what I just said, astringency, aftertaste, energetics, you're also going to look at your notes from last week of Cascade. And you're going to see, oh, is there a difference? Let's do this again. As I drink it, I'm going to also think about aroma and taste. Okay, it's your turn.
A question from a participant: at what temperature more or less are the leaves fried at? Did you walk through temperature difference?
I did. So the leaves are fried at around 200 degrees. Sometimes a little hotter. And remember, we're not in an area whereby they have machinery that can tell for sure. But we know roughly. So you're going through lowering the temperature, dissipating the steam. We draw, this was the 175 or the 200. The first, you're clean, you are, I'm
Clean right now, you know.
okay, so
Yeah.
she uses slightly
So, yeah,
hotter,
but yeah,
yes,
hot,
hot,
yeah.
yeah, and you can use any temperature between 175 and 212 when you're cleaning and making sure that the cups are ready.
So I
to go
need
through
a
this process.
hot glass.
Yes. you
It's
need
definitely
hot
we need.
glass. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, now. she's
All the
gonna-
tinting clean,
Yeah,
all the
everything's
flavor.
completely clean. Yep. Now Tea Master's gonna draw the 175 and dissipate the steam and heat. Remember a nice rhythm? You're gonna make sure your timers are at 3 minutes. And you add the water to the tea. And you make sure you hit the timer. 3 minutes. Okay. So. We're at this step where we're frying. We're frying at a lower temperature. We said one reason that's obvious why the lower temperature is used. And that's because the microorganisms go into stasis. And that's important because once you're all done being defined as getting to that 70% finish line, once you get there, you want, and you wither, you want those microorganisms to wake up and start the process of fermentation. But I ask you this, did some other process occur because it was a lower temperature? We've not talked about this before, but there is another process that occurs, and that is you don't fully denature the enzymes. Therefore, you don't get the same exact flavor profile as an end result as green tea. Green tea, you fully denature as much as fully can happen at 300 or 400 degrees, which is mostly completely denatured. And so you get only the essence of the tea leaves without oxidation. Here you have denatured everything on the surface. But everything within the tea leaves, not everything, but many of the enzymes within the tea leaves are still not denatured. Therefore, once you come to the storage step, once you come to the conclusion of the 70%, what happens? Slowly, those enzymes begin to work. And remember, there's a race. And that race is between fermentation and oxidation. Rabbit and the hare, who wins at the beginning? Well, within the first 5 yards, it's that rabbit. So fermentation is winning at the beginning. Within X number of years, oxidation starts to catch up and fermentation slows down. Yes.
Some comments back from participants already. The dry leaves already give out a distinct aroma of freshness, sweetness, and they're really fragrant.
Freshness, sweetness, and fragrance. You said dry or wet?
Dry leaves.
Dry leaves. And this is how the Chinese, by the way, would characterize it. In fact, they characterize this particular grove of trees as having almost a melon type of fragrance. All right, your timers have gone off. You're separating the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Not in a hurry, making sure all the water's out. And wow, what a wonderful appearance. Should be like this, somewhat yellow.
Another participant says the leaves have a deep, sweet aroma reminding her of prunes or cherries.
Deep, sweet aroma reminding this participant of plums or cherries. And again, the Chinese would characterize this as fruity. Yep.
Yeah, for her prunes, and I'm thinking, so the dried fruit, she's getting.
Oh, dried fruit, I'm sorry.
No, dried
Yeah.
fruit and fresh fruit kind of scent. And another participant said that the dried leaves had a floral scent that evolved into a scent of a high-class floral perfume.
I like this. So the dried leaves had a floral scent, and then that evolved into, for this participant, almost a high-class floral perfume. So why is this comment okay? In fact, why is it a good comment? So we have, you heard the sweet, you heard the fruit, you've heard this variety of fruit, you hear floral. Hey, what happened? Fruit and floral. Well, as a reminder, for some of us, what we detect as fruit, others detect as floral, and vice versa. So that's why this is fully all in the ballpark. Great job.
This participant then, and some part two to her comment that the tea liquor has no green tea taste to her. It's not as sweet as Cascade, a previous raw black folks tried, but it's still smooth and juicy with hints of bright peach goodness.
Okay, I love this comment. Let's see if I can capture all of it. It's not the same as green tea. And in fact, there is still some sweetness, but it's not as sweet as Cascade last week. And thank you for making that comparison. I 100% agree. It's still smooth, but this one, this participant characterizes as juicy. And I love this totality of comment because it is not the same flavor as green tea. And we've just gone through why that might be. And the fact that it's not as sweet. Cascade is mellowing. And as it mellows, it's getting sweeter. So if you asked me in your next question, what would I predict for this tea in 4 or 5 years? I predict an intensity of both sweetness and fruitiness.
Another participant says the steep leaves to him seem to have a combination of vegetal and floral scent.
Steep leaves have a combination for this participant of floral and vegetal. Love this comment also. You know why? Because at the end of the day, this is a plant. So if there's not some sort of vegetality to it, then we probably missed a little something. Floral and vegetal, very great comment.
Another participant says for her, she gets this juicy, sweet first sip, and then afterward, more vegetality with a dryness to it as she takes more sips.
Great comment. Juicy, sweet to lead off with, a vegetality, and then the key comment, key portion of this comment is a dryness. My mouth actually is very dry right now. I've had 3 or 4 sips of this thing, and that dryness is hanging around there. Yes. Okay, so love the fact that you're catching the forward notes of sweetness, but then you're following it up with the vegetality, because definitely with raw blacks, you can't leave that vegetality. Some raw blacks, so there's a village that's about 150 miles south of this, called Lao. In that village, when you try the tea, yeah, there's sweetness there, but there is an astringency and a dryness that wipes out everything else. you don't even get the vegetality. That's how strong that is, and that's how distinctive it is. So each of the mountains, because of the difference in terroir, plus for Labanjang, is it growing in a mixed forest? No, it's growing all with tea trees. Although they are trees, they're not hugely ancient. The Labanjang are anywhere from 1,000 to 1,300 years old. Here, we're talking ancient. So there's a different feel between ancient, and one of the characteristics that's almost always in place between ancient, and puberty ancient, I probably shouldn't have quite said it that way, starting ancient, is this sense of dryness and sense of astringency. In the young ancients, there we go. In the young ancients, you get much more of a sense of astringency, dryness, and you get up there to truly ancient, then it's all about the mellowness. It's about the balance of flavors. I would characterize this, and by the way, think back to last week about Cascade. I think we even mentioned this last week, that Cascade has a balance in terms of the flavors, in terms of the aroma, a balancedness to it. This has less balancedness to it, but it will develop into a more balanced as it ages, yes.
Another comment, this tea has calmed my stomach this morning. It's warming, it's refreshing at the same time. Is that possible?
Warming and refreshing at the same time, absolutely possible. By the way, well, and let me finish the comment. This participant said it calmed the stomach. And so why is calm the stomach relevant here? And I'm extremely happy that this comment came up because remember, this is already starting the fermentation process. So you're getting the benefits. That calmness is from the fermentation already starting to take place. The calming sense of this, it's also very interesting because part of that has to do with that fermentation. Remember, generally speaking, do you ever say after you drink, say, Chara or Premier's Choice, oh yeah, I'm feeling calm? No, usually you're feeling, okay, I've got some energy going through me. Or if your stomach is empty and you're drinking that stuff, it's like, you know, maybe I should have had something in my stomach. Not with this. With this, because it's already starting that fermentation journey, you're getting that benefit. Yes.
Another participant says she gets that sort of balanced, mellow feel as well. And that for her, it brings a feeling of just a pleasant feeling.
So this participant gets that, you said balance?
That she feels the balance.
A balance,
floral and
okay.
sweet and
The
it's
balance
mellow.
of the flavors, just a very pleasant feeling. And again, I like this comment because, you know, if it's not stored properly, this tea becomes hard to drink. And it's very sharp. And sometimes it just doesn't have that sweetness. That's a storage problem. That is not an inherent tea problem. When it's done properly at this age, it should always have some sense of this type of feeling. Year by year, even if the terroir, if the climate factors change, you're still going to get some sense of this. Yes.
Are there trichomes in this tea?
Yes. So the question is, are there trichomes? Not as many as in some of the other teas, far fewer. And the reason being, there's an exact reason for this. By the time a tree becomes ancient, and within that whole ecological situation of being with other plants and other trees in there, it's less at risk for attack by bugs. Also, with the roots intersecting with the roots of the entire nearby forest. That helps it resist pests. This is different from monoclonal. Monoclonal, you take a raw black monoclonal, you'll see many more trichomes in it because it's youthful. It's got to have those trichomes. Remember, tender. Who does the lion chase? Does it chase that old bull that is scrawny and weak? Or does it chase the tender cow? It always chases the tender cow, unless it's a bad hunter. Yes.
This tea, for participant, this tea is making me feel calm and relaxed, and at least for the moment, insulated from trials and tribulations of the world.
All right, this tea makes this participant calm and relaxed and is an insulator against the trials and tribulations of the world. I like this comment because it is the type of tea that you can have starting off your day. You make sure you haven't read the New York Times yet. You put that aside. You take your tea first, and it's like nothing bad exists.
Participant says the infused leaves opened up to a combination of green and yellow colors similar to Cascade, although Forest Reserve opened up whiter than Cascade's leaves at the first group.
So this is an evaluation, great evaluation, by the way, of the leaves. Green and yellow, wider than the Cascade leaves, good observation. Different village, older age. This particular tree varietal does have wider leaves. And that, by the way, if you do enough of these tastings, you suddenly realize that largeness of leaf usually translates to a fuller flavor. In some ways, I don't like using the word fuller. Here's what I'm going to use instead. Deeper. This has a deeper flavor than Cascade. And that just isn't just an age thing. This will always, by equivalent year, have a deeper flavor. Great catch on that.
Another comment, Forest Reserve is more vegetal and more floral on the nose than Cascade was.
More vegetal and floral on the nose than Cascade. And, I like this comment because Cascade, if you remember last week, we said it was immediately available. There was less mystery about it. And it was that sweetness and that mellowness and the juiciness of it. Here, you're dealing with something, from my perspective, I would call this more complex. But this complexity is an age-related thing, more than it's age and it is a different village. It's both those things. All right, let's see how I'm doing. Oh, I'm doing appropriately. That's good. So the other steps. So I stopped at the critical step to point out the difference between green and raw black. You might ask yourself and have the question, well, is the catechin level about the same as green? And the answer is it's about the same as green. As it ages, it will be dramatically different than green, but at the beginning, it's about the same. Yes.
What's your favorite raw black tea on the board?
The question is, what's my favorite raw black tea on the board? I love Primordial Forest. I love that a lot. Secondarily, among the aged black teas, raw blacks that we have on the board, I also love Newman. Those two, Primordial Forest and Newman. Those two are my favorites, without question. So again, let's finish up the process so that you know what this unfinished tea is. We've already gone through the frying process, and we see the difference between this and green tea. After frying, all of this in these villages is hand rolled. And hand rolling is usually a 45 to 90 minute process where what they're trying to do is break down the cells in the leaves. They're also, in addition to that, creating less moisture, because at the end of the day, you don't want too much moisture in these leaves. the conclusion of rolling, and by the way, from the Chinese perspective, when they talk to us in the tea business, they always talk about the rolling as the key component of what the end result is going to be. And from their perspective, it influences the balance, it influences the mellowness. They feel that that all the rolling portion goes into that. If you ask me, have I seen scientific articles which confirm that? The answer is no. But I believe, because they've experimented at the village level with this, that they're probably correct. At the conclusion of rolling, what do? You wither again. And, oh, do you wither inside or on the machine? Oh, no. You wither outside. You want sun dry. Why do you want sun dried again? To wake up those organisms, get them out of stasis, get them working on the tea leaves. Two more steps, one which every tea goes through, and one which some do and some don't. The some do and some don't is if you want to actually make a cake, you re-wet the leaves and then you compress them into a cake. And the cake is usually 357 or 400 grams per cake usually, or you can compress them into other forms as well. Chinese do this at the village level, they do it at the industrial level, both levels do it. Typically, raw black rarely comes loose leaf. We have it loose leaf because we want you all to have the opportunity to see how it's done and to see the differences over time. It's a little harder when you have a cake because you're breaking off the cake. It's aging at different speeds within the cake. Whereas with raw loose leaf, it's aging across the leaves at a more uniform rate. So that's why we tend to, these years, do the loose leaf. So that's a step that some do and some don't. Majority of raw black is put in cakes, minority is loose leaf. The thing that everybody does is they package. So those are the steps. Love this forest preserve. We got this. We made a judgment about this. You know, we've slowed down the number of new raw blacks we get. They have to be unique in some way. And the depth of this to us was unique. And we know these producers, and this is an industrial, we know these village people very, very well. And we know that they're very conscientious. So that's why we ended up getting this. Yes.
After they re-moisten the leaves to make a cake, then do they dry it again in cake form?
Yes. So the question is, wait a minute. You went through this process, you sun dried it, you got them all dried, and then what? You re-wet it? What's that? You have to re-wet it because if you don't re-wet it, when you compress it, it won't stick together. And so that's why you do that. And then you're correct in the question, do you dry it again? You absolutely dry. Usually you don't sun dry. You dry it in a special drying room, humidity control. It's on shelves, very neat. It's very cool.
For one of the participants, she feels this raw black has a deeper flavor, fuller in the mouth, denser, but with smooth finish. Really gets the lingering nature of the sweetness, and there's some spiciness for her as well.
Oh, great. So this particular commentator talks about a little spiciness in this, and that's the nature, by the way, of newer raw blacks. As it ages, that spiciness ages out. So if you had this in 5 years, you are unlikely to get that spiciness. Talks about this as being deeper. Love the fact that you're coming back to that deeper. Because again, for us, this depth is what turned us on. Yeah, we got to have this. Because we knew that the depth will hang on for a long time, and that smoothness and mellowness that further develops and that sweetness that further develops will be balanced in depth. Compared to Cascade, when this gets to that year that Cascade currently is, which is 4 years old, we believe that this will have more sweetness and more punch. We love Cascade for what it is. It's a great raw black. We bought this because we think that this will end up, and by the way, it sounds like I'm making a judgment. Let's back up. All of you should make decisions year by year on what you like. We do make judgments. We're in the tea business. We have to make some judgments about what we think something's going to develop. But you shouldn't. You should buy what you like now, because what you like now is what you're going to drink. Most of you don't really have the space or the right conditions to store this stuff. And we make all these judgments based on the fact we have space and right conditions. All right, as usual, your commentary has been spot on. You know, in some ways, you teach me. I love the fact that you're able to capture all of these flavors so quickly and so successfully. So great job with that. Next week, we go to a new series. It should be exciting, yes. And we're gonna have Wulong for the next 3. Yes. Including a couple Cliff teas in that. So look forward to seeing everybody next week. Your responsibility this week is to stay safe. Have a great week. Bye-bye now.